right, hello everybody. Welcome to the Introduction to Trapping in Illinois. So we'll got people still filtering in here. We'll go ahead and get started as they do filter in, but I'll go ahead and mention that we are recording this live webinar. So once it's done, we'll have this recording available for everybody. I know it's a whole lot of information. It's kind of like trying to get a drink from a fire hose, just spreading a bunch of water at you, and you're going to try to get little sips where you can, and it's a lot to take in. You're definitely not going to remember everything, but luckily you'll have that recording to go back and use if you need to touch back on something. And really what this webinar is kind of intended to be is a 40,000 view of what trapping in Illinois and really trapping in the Midwest is, and then hopefully it will come up with what you might be interested in. It's so variable. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it, which we'll get into the actual webinar, but maybe you're interested in muskrats, maybe it's coyotes, maybe it's raccoons. They're all vastly different, so hopefully, if nothing else, this webinar will show you what you might be interested in and how to kind of get started to look into that further. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Curtis Twellman of the Illinois Learn to Hunt program. We've also got Lauren with us here.
Hi guys.
She'll be acting as question master as we go along, and she'll also be, if you all have any questions or comments, feel free to throw them in the chat, and Lauren will make sure that we get those answered here on live air. So jump right into it. A lot to talk about. First thing we got to talk about is we talk about this in all the webinars, but Illinois is quite a bit different than what it used to look like. So here we have a map. That map on the left, that's early 1800s. So by that time, a good amount of forest had already been chopped down. But fast forward to that map on the right, this is more present day, and you see just a ton of that yellow color, which may be hard to read what that is, but that's agriculture. Pretty much all of what used to be prairies, forest, and wetlands, vast majority of it is agriculture now. Another thing that we see a ton of on that map is, of course, that pink, purple, fuchsia color, whatever you want to call it. That's like urban development. Which obviously you see a ton of it up there by Chicago. That is historically not considered to be good wildlife habitat, yet there are some species of fur bears, raccoons in particular, that have really carved out a nice niche working in areas like that. And a lot of you know this because maybe you have to chase them away from your trash cans, or if you have a dog or cat that you feed on the porch, maybe they compete with that food with raccoons. So there are some critters that have utilized those types of habitats, but for the most part, a lot of critters don't like those types of habitats. And another thing that we did at the same time as we're chopping down everything and convert it to ag, we also like to make the distinction that this was what we call the period of extermination. So there was no conservation in mind in the early 1800s in North America. It was all just basically do what you can, take what you can. If something threatened your livestock, or even if they didn't threaten, if you just thought that they might threaten your livestock at some point, the vast majority of these landowners were just laying waste to everything that was scary. So large predators like mountain lions, wolves, largely wiped off the landscape. And what this did is it kind of opened up for those mesocarnivores like raccoons and coyotes. You know, they were relegated to the bushes because they were not the biggest, baddest brother on the corner. And once those bigger predators kind of got eliminated, it was free reign for some of those critters. So really is, very bad series of events for things like mountain lions and wolves, but it turned out pretty good for coyotes and raccoons. Now, I talked about the period of extermination, so now let's get into the period of conservation. So starting in the early 1900s, in the Pittman-Robertson Act right there in 1937, but there was a bunch of different acts and things that were going into legislation at this time that was to protect conservation. So something in North America we were not concerned with at all. And then people came about like Aldo Leopold, Theodore Roosevelt, all these folks that started talking about conservation, and people got much more interested in these sort of things. And so not only did we start putting our interest into these things, but we started putting money into these things. And the Pittman-Robertson Act in particular, that's an excise tax on firearms and ammunition that's put on at the vendor level, 10 to 11%, and all of that money is earmarked to go back to states into conservation or into wildlife education. So really cool self-funded system, and worked out really great. And since basically the inception of conservation, since North America turned into the land of extermination, into the land of conservation, legal hunting and or trapping have never caused a species to become endangered or extinct. Always like to point that out because an important distinction that happened before conservation was around. We all remember passenger pigeon, heath hen, number of other critters that are no longer around. That was before conservation was even a discussion. Now, you might be saying, what the heck is a fur bearer? All mammals have fur, right? We remember back to our maybe high school or middle school biology. That's what makes a mammal. They got some fur, maybe they feed their young milk, these are good things, but a fur bearer is actually a legal designation by most state wildlife agencies, and fur bearer is specifically for a mammal that has historically been harvested primarily for their fur. Now that doesn't mean that's their only reason that they're harvested. This little muskrat over here, believe you me, he's a tasty little critter, but the primary focus, the primary reason people have gone after him in the past has been for his fur, and the meat has been a secondary thing. So he's called a fur bearer, whereas an animal like a deer, where we think of a deer primarily as meat, and a lot of people unfortunately don't even use the hide of their deer, which I think is unfortunate, but deer actually does have a hide that's useful. You can either trade that for a pair of gloves with your local fur buyer, or save them up and make something cool out of buckskin. But anyway, that's the designation. Deer is a big game animal because everybody wants to eat it first, use the fur, the skin second. Muskrat's the opposite. But a very diverse group of critters. We're talking about the largest rodent in North America with the beaver, second largest rodent in the whole world, just behind the capybara. Also the smallest vertebrate carnivore in the whole world with the least weasel. Really cool that we got those around. Not a lot of them. The most common that you'll probably see in Illinois, short-tailed weasel, and no weasels are super common. But in Wisconsin, where I worked for 3 or 4 years, they're a little more common up there. It seems like weasels do the best where there's good snowfall. And if there's not good snowfall, they seem to lose out to other predators, other carnivores, and especially things like rodenticide. Super hard on things like weasels because they're small, but that's all they eat is mice. So definitely I always encourage people not to use poisons. Not the way to go. But because this is such a variable suite of critters, the management for these critters is also variable. Now, some people might look at trapping raccoon and muskrat and be like, well, what are you talking about? There's no management there at all. Because what's the limit? There's not one. There's no limit of muskrat. Not a daily limit, not a possession limit. So you don't have to worry about how many muskrats you get in a day or in an entire season. And why is that? Well, fur bearers are basically managed according to their biology and according to basically the historic human take. We've got a good idea at what's going to happen by what's happened in previous years. So a species like a muskrat is a big-time R strategist. So here's another term that you might remember back from your old biology days. Hopefully somebody paid attention back then. Animals are split up into either R strategist or K strategist, depending on what their strategy to live is. R strategists have a whole bunch of babies. They reproduce a ton, hence the R. They don't live very long. K strategists are more like us people, or the examples of rhinos or elephants, where they put a ton of effort into raising a small number of offspring, but they have a really long lifespan. K strategists. So muskrats are super big time on that R strategist side of the spectrum, so much so that they can actually have as many as 3 litters per year in Illinois. There's actually been studies done, I believe this was done in Wisconsin, on muskrats, in particular on Horicon Marsh, and they found out that you could reduce the total muskrat population in a given year by 80% and not see a change in the overall population after the next breeding season, so after the next spring. So that's pretty amazing. When you think about it, muskrats are big time R strategists, so they don't need a limit. Now, things like bobcats, river otters, things that have a little bit lower reproductive potential and a little bit easier to overtrap, they're managed different ways. So in the case of a river otter, we've got a limit in Illinois. You can get 5 river otter and then you're done. Badger's another critter where we've got a limit. You've got 1 in the south and 2 in the north. But bobcat is by tag only. So there is a bobcat drawing that takes place in September, so it's already happened. You actually do have to draw a bobcat tag in order to go for bobcats. You can hunt or trap for bobcats, but you do have to draw that tag before you go for one. They did just this year double the allocation of bobcat permits, so it is getting easier to draw those tags. So if that's an animal you're interested in, definitely encourage you to get in that drawing next September. It's $5, non-refundable to get in that, but bobcat's a pretty cool critter. And then of course I wrote in here coyotes. That's going to be the opposite of what I'm talking about with bobcats and river otter. Coyotes are probably the most highly persecuted animal on the landscape in the Midwest. And the reason I like to point this out is people always talk about how smart big bucks are, right? Like big bucks are so smart. You got to really watch your scent. You got to play the wind. Everything has to be right in order for you to take a big buck. And that's because they are so highly persecuted. But it's a fraction of what coyotes are, because if you think about it, how long is the deer season? Okay, archery season's pretty long, but if you're talking firearm season, that's just a few days. I think the old coyote laughs at that in his sleep, because coyote season, if you haven't checked, runs year round. People taking nuisance coyotes year round, landowners, farmers, road runners, everybody seems to hate coyotes, but they're just a super impressive critter, and in my opinion, the toughest fur bearer to either trap or hunt by far is coyotes. And if you yourself either hunt or trap a coyote successfully, then I think you've done something that's more difficult than the biggest buck in the woods. Just my opinion. Now, what are the management goals? If you were to talk to IDNR any state, why are they worried about taking fur bearers, right? Because we have other means of warmth. We don't need fur to stay warm, right? That's right. We have other means. That doesn't mean that they're better means. You know, we also have other ways to be fed than eating deer and rabbit and squirrel. But we know, or at least hopefully we know, that those things are good because we're sourcing our meat locally. We're reducing our footprint by doing that. We're getting really nourishment food from a wild harvested critter. I probably don't have to sell you on that, but I can tell you the exact same things hold true for warmth. You can go buy other warmth at Bass Pro or Farm and Fleet or Walmart, but I promise you that if you actually look into the materials that goes into that, if you don't think that there's a blood trail leading to that jacket or that hat that you bought, well, you're being awfully naive. Even the most, even like a cotton shirt, something that you think is, hey, well, this can't be bad. It's just cotton, right? They grow it in a field. Sure, yeah, but have you ever seen a cotton field? A giant monoculture of ag that was once a menagerie of forest and prairies and wetlands, and now it's a monoculture that's basically not useful for any critter. So Is a cotton shirt without any blood trail going to it? No. Basically, everything that we eat, everything that we wear, does have a cost, and really trapping and obtaining furs to use yourself and obtain your warmth that way, just like getting wild game is the best way to eat. That's the best, most ecologically friendly way to stay warm as well. But back to the management goals, got off on a little tangent there, but it was a good one. What are they worried about? They want to reduce abundant wildlife that has a human use while also maintaining healthy populations. So they have, it's on their onus to make sure that populations stay healthy. So if something happened and all of a sudden Illinois was targeting either muskrats or raccoons or some critter in a way that they never have before, their management strategies would change. They review these things every year. They survey about 20% of the trappers each year to get an estimation of the total take. They're watching these things. So if anything was to go up, any kind of red flag, they can adjust those management strategies. And most of these fur bearers are actually critters that do have not only disease risks, but also they have a lot of human wildlife conflict potentials. So I already talked about coyotes and how every farmer, rancher, chicken owner, roadrunner, whatever, they all ate coyotes. But think about the beaver. You know, the beaver, awesome critter when he's on the back 40. But when he starts clogging up your culverts and starts flooding your road and starts flooding your pole barns, wow, I've seen farmers switch to like the biggest beaver hater you can ever imagine, you know? So a lot of these critters are at odds with people at time and time again. So having a way to reduce those populations and keep them in a healthy amount, because remember, we don't have the large predators that are keeping them in check, so we basically have to do that. And also, don't forget that because there's a human use and because the IDNR can sell trapping licenses and all this stuff, and hunters and trappers are out there buying equipment, generating money, a lot of that money is earmarked to go right back into conservation and fund the whole system. So the whole wheel keeps turning. And as a bonus, this is a bonus, this isn't even directly tied to management, but we get to monitor difficult species with really low detection rates. And so if you think about detection rates, an animal like a deer has the highest detection rates ever, right? If you have deer in your neighborhood, you know it because you see them. If you have a bobcat in your neighborhood, there's a good chance you do not know it. Because most people, even people that live right around some of the most dense bobcat populations in the entire North America, hardly ever see bobcats. Doesn't mean they're not there, they just have a really low detectability. Now, bobcats have probably seen you, but a lot of you have not seen bobcats. So because trappers are out there catching these critters, we get a bonus way to monitor them. And with species like bobcats that are a tag-only species, when I worked in Wisconsin, they're a tag-only species there too. So guess what happens if you trap one, you don't have a tag, you release it, but the Wisconsin DNR was putting collars on them. So people that had a bobcat that didn't have a tag could call up the Wisconsin DNR. They'd come out, put a collar on the cat and release it, and then let the trapper know, you know, every once in a while kind of what the cat's doing, keep it interesting. But Wisconsin collared over 100 bobcats doing that, utilizing private trappers. It's one of the largest sample sizes in the history of mankind for bobcat ever. And Wisconsin did it incredibly cheap because guess what? They didn't have to do the trapping. The public did it for free. Really, it's amazing. But let's get into some tracking. So this is the first thing that probably a lot of people that are interested in trapping, maybe this is what you notice. Because when it comes to mammals, these critters are nocturnal, right? We get to see birds and we get to see snakes and we get to see all the diurnal critters because that's the same time that we're out and about. But when it comes to mammals, most of the mammals in North America have been relegated to the nocturnal time frame. You know, that's their time to shine. Fur bearers are no exception. Most 90 5% or more of their activity is going to happen after night. So the best thing that we can find to tell us what they're doing is usually going to be tracks. And the first distinction that I like to make is, okay, let's count the toes. All right, because if it's only showing 4 toes, and this is not 100%, but this is pretty good. If it's only showing 4 toes, it's probably a dog or a cat. Probably. Because most critters are going to show 5 toes in their track. Dogs and cats, of course, have the dew claw that's higher up. It doesn't show in the track. So if you count the toes and you count 4 with a mid-sized track, most of the time you're dealing with either a dog or a cat. Now you'll see some of those tracks on the right and you'll be like, hey, it shows weasel with only 4 toes. They have 5, just the 5th little toe is so small it usually doesn't appear really well, but it's there. Most all of those critters have 5 tracks that'll show. There's a few like rodents and stuff that might have 4 on the front and 5 on the back, but it's a much smaller track. So when you're dealing with a track that's over an inch across, dog or cat most of the time, and now the best way to tell what it is, most people are going to look for those claws, right? Because we know that cats got retractable claws, most of them anyway, not the cheetah. But most of them got the retractable claws, and most canines do not have retractable claws. Species like gray fox have semi-retractable claws. Another story. Still, their claws almost always show in their tracks. That's one thing you can look for, but I would argue that it's not the best. The best thing to look for, in my mind, is something that lasts longer than the claw print, and that's the center of the track. In any dog track, and I'm talking whether it's your Aunt Edna's little Chihuahua all the way up to the biggest gray wolf in Canada, you're going to see an X in that track that's basically made with a pyramid in the center. So if you look at that track from the coyote in the bottom left, and I'll move my cursor here, you can see there's an X. You can run between the toes, and you got a perfectly straight line for one side of the X here, if you can see my cursor, and here you got another one. And it's raised up with the highest little point in the center with a little pyramid. Look at that. You could be in Giza right there in Egypt. Looks like a little pyramid in the middle of the set. That's a dog track. Now we go over to cats. Now we can't draw an X that goes through there because cats have irregular toes. So look at this. I try to go through here, I hit the pad. I try to go through here, I hit the pad. Even up here, there's no way you could do it. There's just no way you can do it because they have asymmetrical toes. They also have a leading toe. So you'll always see where one toe is ahead of the other. Whereas on dogs, they match almost exactly. They always match. And on cats, they have a leading toe. They're asymmetrical, and you cannot draw an X. See that center? That's no pyramid. That's some kind of amoeba. Who knows what it is, but you're not in Giza, Egypt anymore. You're somewhere else, so you're not in dog country. You're in cat country. That's how I like to tell them apart. And the reason those things stand out is because of the shape of the pad and the shape of the toes. Cats got asymmetrical toes. Also, a cat has 2 lobes on the leading edge of their pad, and then 3 lobes on the back, which gives it a different shape. Dogs would just have a single lobe on the front edge of their pad. Really helps to push, and that's where most of their weight is centered. So that pushes all that dirt up into that little mound, that little pyramid right in the center there. So that's my favorite way to tell dog or cat. But then you might be saying, but wait a minute, there's a whole lot of dogs and a whole lot of cats out there. From there, it gets a little bit more tricky. With cats, all the cats look very similar, and it's straight up size. I like to put my finger across the pad of the track, and if it's 1 inch or if it's just one little section of your pinky, you're dealing with a house cat. Probably. There is some size overlap, of course. Could be a young bobcat, but if it's 1 inch across, probably a house cat. If it's 2 little sections of your pinky, so now it's close to 2 inches across that pad, now you're dealing with a bobcat. And then if it's your entire pinky, so it's all 3 sections of your pinky, if you've got a full pinky, then you're in mountain lion country now. So if you can lay all 3 across the width of that pad, Yeah, you're definitely looking at mountain lion. And then a lynx, which would be absolutely incredible for Illinois. They only turn up in Wisconsin, I mean, once every 10 to 15 years or so. It's not common at all. But a lynx, even though a lynx body size is a little bit smaller than a bobcat on average, their track is actually bigger than a mountain lion's. So they've got those big snowshoe feet. So giant tracks on those guys. Now, one first thing that I want to tell people when you're looking at either a cat or a dog track, we need to say domestic or non-domestic, because I don't care where you are in Illinois, there's the possibility of domestic dogs or cats there. And this can be tricky, but for the most part, if you look and see what the animal's doing, wild felids and canids move very direct from object to object to object. And mostly straight lines. Now, cats are way less of a straight line than the canids, but generally, if I see animals covering large distances without going and checking out everything, it's probably a wild animal. If I see either canid or felid tracks and they're bouncing all over the field leisurely, like an animal that gets 3 square meals a day and has a warm place to sleep, well, guess what? That's a domestic, and it can be anywhere. So that's my favorite way to pick out domestic or wild. And it's not 100%, but it'll help you. And then when it comes to the canids, you see that coyote track is really egg shaped. And that's going to be very consistent. Coyote tracks, unless they're on a super dead run, they're going to be really egg shaped. All the toes are really going to be stuck together like a perfect little egg, little Easter egg. And then most of your dogs are going to have splayed out toes even when they're walking slow. So another good way to tell them apart. Now, some other tracks that are super diagnostic are possum here. Look at that. Got a different front foot, different back foot. And the cool thing about a possum, his front foot, I think, looks just like our hand. Like if you were to slip and you only weighed about 8 pounds, that would be your hand, wouldn't it? I kind of feel like it. Anyway, possum hand, pretty close to a human hand shape, just a tiny little, like a gremlin, you know, scary little horror movie gremlin hand. That's your possum hand. And then, of course, on their back foot, they got that hallux or that thumb that sticks out. That's diagnostic. None of our other critters have that thumb like that. So if you see that, you know you're dealing with a possum. Our raccoons over here, they are another plantigrade animal like us, so they walk on flat feet. That's opposed to being digigrade like our dogs and cats that walk up on their toes. They walk on their flat feet, so you can see their back foot, kind of like a big old bear track with long toes. Their front foot kind of looks like our hand again, but now the fingers are closed. So if the front track looks like a human hand with fingers closed, it's probably a raccoon. And then if it looks like a human hand that's way splayed out, hey, it's probably a possum. But look at that, 5 toes on all those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Man, I can count. All right, now tracks aren't the only thing they're leaving out there. Animals also have to use the restroom just like we do. And some of the times this can be some of the best sign to look for. Raccoons, for example, which is that top scat there on the top right, they, for whatever reason, I guess they're proud of it, they love to leave their scat in a very open, easy to see area. So if you're walking along a creek and you see like that, a big flat hard rock or concrete, guess what? You go look at it, there's probably going to be raccoon droppings on there. Now be careful, raccoon roundworm is in there. That is a zoonotic potential infector, and it can be very, very bad. So obviously most people are not eating raccoon scat, but toddlers, little kids, keep an eye on them, because look at that. That looks like something you might get at Whole Foods, you know, fancy little granola treat. So keep an eye on kids when you're around the raccoon scat. But then when it gets to coyotes and bobcats, if you find a concentration of scat, they generally like to do that near the boundaries of their territory. And so all fur bearers defend a territory. If you think of a territory as a polygon or a circle, just to think of it as something simple, think of it as a circle. the animals spend most of their time around the periphery of that circle, not the interior, because they're looking for other critters, you know, and they're keep trying to keep other critters away. So if you find concentrations of scat, those are great places to set up because that's where the critters are spending a lot of time. That's also areas where multiple different home ranges might overlap. Last thing up there, got some otter. Well, otter toilets are a popular thing that water trappers will look for. Otters will use the same toilets over and over. Mink can do the same thing, but you'll see just a whole bunch of fish scales and pieces of crawfish and other things that they're eating. There's other sign out there other than just scat and tracks, you know. Some of the stuff we see muskrat push-ups go up, right? If you drive by the marsh right now, you see a lot of activity by muskrats. They're building these push-ups all around the marsh, and that's because once the ice comes on, muskrat's not big, powerful animal. He can't break through the ice, but if he's got these push-ups all over the marsh, guess what? They always go up above the water line. He's got a platform inside that hut where he can stand outside of the water and munch on food and be covered from above, so that birds of prey can't see him, other animals can't see him, and he can just swim under the ice from hut to hut to hut, get up out of the water and feed, go about his business and be pretty safe. And it's pretty tough out there for a muskrat because they're just a fuzzy little potato that's delicious. Everything likes to eat them. They don't have sharp teeth capable of biting, you know, all that kind of stuff. So now, besides the muskrat push-up, probably the most famous of all fur bearer sign, the beaver dam. The beaver dam, this is great. This is one of the reasons why we respect beavers so much. They're a keystone species. They actually make habitat that other species not only thrive in, but some species are almost dependent upon. So amazing critter. The only problem is like I mentioned before, those beaver dams are awesome when they're on the back 40. They're not so awesome when they're right next to your pole barn or your road. So they're also not so awesome if they chop down trees that you planted and you hope to stay there. Is the way that beaver chop down trees, not only do you lose your tree, but they also leave those sharp stobs in the ground, which that's a big one. That's not so bad. The smaller ones, oh, those are bad when you're duck hunting. You walk into them with waders. They're basically just like punji sticks. So what is legal game when we're trapping? Some animals you can hunt, some you can trap. All the fur bears there are legal game for trapping. There's only certain ones of them you can hunt, but all of them you can trap. Woodchuck is the special one because if you know some things about woodchuck, you know that here at some point they're probably already kind of underground, hibernating, resting out the cold winter months. So for what's most of normal trapping season, they're not around. So they have a special trapping season that's basically just for nuisance reasons. And I didn't update the year, but actually the date is still the same. November 10th, 2024 is still when trapping season starts, and it goes till February 15th of 2025. So I didn't update the year, forgot to do that, but the dates are still right. And then of course the bobcat drawing is in September, so keep that in mind next year. Now, there are a lot of trapping regulations. Trapping is one of the most highly regulated things that you can do. So a ton of regulations. I'm not going to hit them all today. I'm going to go through, these are basically the highlights. Always carry around with you I carry the hunting and trapping digest with me all the time. I mean, obviously I've got it on my phone, but I've got a hard copy too. Carry those with you because even when I worked in Wisconsin and I helped write the regulations, there's so much in there that it's hard to remember it all. Carry it with you, and there's no shame in referring to that while you're out in the field. I do it all the time. But for some of these highlights, one of the biggest ones that you see a lot of people don't know about, site exposed bait. You got to be at least 30 foot away from site exposed bait. And this means feathers, this means a chunk of fur, So this is a good time to mention that you got to be cautious if you watch YouTube trapping videos to try to learn how to trap in Illinois. Every state is different, vastly different. Even one state away in Wisconsin or in Missouri, vastly different. So you do have to make sure that you're watching Illinois specific content, or at least whatever content you're watching, make sure that after you watch it, you read through the Illinois regulations so you know what may or may not fly here. Some places, site exposed bait you can trap right next to. A lot of people will hang feathers right on their bobcat set, but that is a good way to catch birds of prey. So in a lot of the Midwestern states, and especially here in Illinois, got to be at least 30 feet away from any site exposed bait. Now that doesn't mean you can't use any bait like that, and I'll tell you exactly how I've used it before in the past. Is let's say you've got a deer carcass, you've already cut all your meat off there, but you still got the bones, and there's a little bit of meat on there, right? Well, if you've got a private spot to do this, which I did at the time, I could drag that carcass out in the middle of a grass field and stake it through the pelvis so it doesn't get drug away, or at least not all of it gets drug away. Put it there in a grass field and come back 2 days later, and it's going to be like a spoke and wheel pattern going to this carcass through the grass field. There's going to be trails coming to it from all over, and I'll set up those trails and get at least 30 feet away. But personally, I like to be 100 feet away, because the animal, whether it's a fox or a coyote or a bobcat, the closer it gets to the bait, the more wary, the more scared it is, because he's worried about what else is there, right? These are things you got to worry about when you're a fox walking around. Is there already going to be 2 coyotes eating on this carcass? As soon as I take a bite, are they going to come out and, whip me? These are things they're thinking about. So I set my sets 100 feet away if I can, because at that point the animals are just moving. They're a little bit less cautious, and that's fine. You can set traps in that same field with site exposed bait, just so long as they're at least 30 away. I will look through the questions here in 1 second here, but I'll go through just these highlights and then we'll go through those. All of your traps have to be tagged, everything. I don't care if you're running a box trap right outside your house, all traps must be tagged. I personally like to just use my customer ID number. It's easy, it's one line, has to be on all of your traps. There's trap size and placement restrictions that I won't get into all of it, but basically when it comes to snares in Illinois, that's a water-only trap. They have to be at least a half underwater. When it comes to big body grip traps, same thing. They have to be at least half in the water. Trap checking requirements. Every single trap has to be run every day and all catches removed. So again, this is state by state. Up in Wisconsin, where they've got a lot more ice, they have under ice restrictions that are basically once you have traps under the ice, you don't need to check them as long as the ice is there. Now most people do, but that does not fly here in Illinois. We have to check all of our traps no matter what every single day and all catches removed. Can't trap within 10 feet from dens on land, so you could do this in the water. If there's a muskrat, beaver den, lodge, you can trap right on it, no problem, but not on dry land. Can't trap within 100 yards of a house without the occupant permission. And a big one, do not disturb dams, lodges, or feed beds. This is another thing you'll see in other states. In the Dakotas, in North Dakota, a common way to trap muskrats is they'll walk up to the muskrat hut, chop a hole in it, they'll put a trap right in there in that platform in the middle, and then they'll cover that hole back up and come back and check their trap later. We cannot do that in Illinois, and in most Midwestern states we do not disturb anything created by fur bearers. Now the one caveat to that is that if you are a nuisance trapper or a landowner, there's certain instances where you can get rid of beaver dams that are causing damage and all that, but for the most part, private trapper, do not disturb or molest anything that fur bearers make. You also can't use any traps with teeth or any deadfalls. So if you've seen, there's that Netflix documentary called Happy People that follows the trappers of Siberia. Okay, Russia is completely different than North America. We do not make deadfalls here. We do not trap with traps with teeth. Um, in the old days, basically, they had to make trap with some teeth in it because the metal was so weak that it wouldn't hold. Now we have strong metal. There's no need for teeth. And really, the teeth were made so that an animal didn't go back and forth in the trap, not so that the trap held them better. It was that they couldn't move too much, and they're just not needed anymore. And yeah, like I mentioned before, it's one of the most regulated activities in the outdoors, so always carry your regulations booklet. All right, let me see. What are the best ways to assist a partner? So I definitely always say it is, if you have a partner to trap with, that is the way to go. Now, it's something you can do solo, so don't worry, everybody out there that is the lone wolf type. You can do it solo, but it works much better with a partner, and that's because, like I mentioned before, we have to check the traps every single day, every day. And so what happens if I wake up someday and I'm sick? I still have to check those traps. If I have a partner that I can say, hey, guess what? I am sick. Can you run my traps today? That's going to get me out of a load of a mess. Or maybe I wake up and a tire's flat on my truck. Who knows what? Basically, if you don't have a partner, you have to find a way out there. You might be taking an Uber to run your traps. If your car is broken down, you have to do that. So having a partner is a big time help. And usually you don't have to do anything. If your partner's the main one trapping, you can just come along, take a nice little hike in the woods. You just know you're there as a backup in case your partner does get sick, injured, whatever happens. You can actually go out there, and as long as your tag is on the trap too, you can actually put more than one tag on a trap. So if me and Lauren were trapping together, we could each have our tag on a trap, and she could check it one day, I could check it another day. We could both check it the third day. All that's fine as long as somebody who's on that trap is checking it every day and taking the animals out of it. Let's see. And we will get into some of the tools here in just a bit. Let's see. And as far as websites to sell and barter, so one of the ones that I will mention is Grunwald. Grunwald Fur and Wool. And I'm sorry right now, I can't remember exactly how he spells that, but maybe Lauren might be able to
Yep, I'll look it up.
and throw it in the chat. But yeah, Grunwald Fur and Wool, he is out of Illinois, and he actually schedules pickups all around the state. And he's one of the people you can trade your deer hides to as well. So, but anyway, he'll have pickups all around the state. He'll be in some Home Depot parking lot or Walmart parking lot. Yeah, there's the link in the chat there. But basically, you just go up. He's sitting there, him or somebody that works with him, sitting there in their trailer. You walk up with all their stuff. They'll grade it, and they'll write you a check right there. Or you can say, nah, I'm not happy with that. You can take your stuff back and leave. Or, like I said, he does trade the deer hides for gloves, does all that stuff. So that's one of them. There's also smaller fur buyers and stuff around. I don't know most of them, but if you're on Facebook and you follow like the Illinois Trappers Association, they have a Facebook group. A lot of times I see people post on there, fur buyers that say, hey, I'm a fur buyer in blank and blank, Illinois, don't forget about me. So just monitoring Facebook's a good way to kind of see who's out there. And then on top of the actual small buyers, there is still the fur harvesters auction. So that is where you would send all your fur to them, and they don't send you any money because they don't actually buy it. They just put it out on a table and sell it to international buyers, and they're basically a broker. So then you pay them a commission, but they're selling to buyers overseas in, Korea, China, all the different countries that are buying fur. They're selling directly to that person. So sometimes you can make more by doing it that way, but there's a delay. And to be honest, most trappers, the money that people are getting for furs, it's not enough that it's going to pay back all the gas that you paid to trap. It just isn't. It's just mainly nice that the fur market's there so that we do have an avenue to make sure that all of our furs get utilized. Because me personally, I do want some fur items, but there's no way I could utilize, all the fur that I would ever catch. So I have people ask me to nuisance trap beaver, muskrat, but I can only wear so many beaver hats and so many beaver gloves. So it's nice to have a way to put them into the fur market. Even if you're not making all your gas back, at least it's getting utilized to the best of its ability, and you'll get a few bucks. Who knows? Maybe you can go out and buy yourself a new trap with it.
especially if you go to a convention.
Oh
Nice and cheap
yeah.
too. And I will say too for the Grunwald, they have a lot of different options for how you can sell your furs as well. They don't have to be fully processed. So that can make it a little bit easier too. They've got kind of guidelines for different things they take. So don't feel like you have to have it, understand how every step of it goes or have it perfectly prepped for them.
Yeah, there's even some fur bear or fur buyers that'll buy them on carcass. So they will buy them on carcass and do the skinning themselves. There are fur buyers that'll do that. So yeah, all steps of the way you can find somebody who's interested. And then the meat also, because fur bears are a kind of a unique thing. There I've seen even people that post that they buy them for the meat too. So I know there for a while there was a somebody that was coming up with a big refrigeration truck from either Mississippi or Louisiana and touring all around the Midwest buying all the raccoon carcasses they could get. Now, of course, they have to be food quality. They've got to be field dressed immediately, taken care of, and all this. But this was maybe 10, 15 years ago. He was buying all of them he could. I can't remember what, $2.50 a piece up to $5 a piece, but hey, it's a utilization for something that for a lot of folks they didn't have a good utilization for. So definitely ways to do that. But also meat is a little easier to use ourselves rather than fur. I definitely encourage all trappers try it. Try it. Even raccoons, I know they get a bad rap because they're thought of as dirty and we see them in our trash cans and all that stuff. But I promise you, if you cook them in barbecue sauce in a crock pot and throw them on a sandwich, most people are going to eat it and not know it's any different than pork. It really, it's not bad. Um, there can be bioaccumulation concerns, so I definitely would never take one from a place that uses poison, or if I suspect poison, always check the animal's organs. And if you see anything that looks weird, if the kidneys, liver is enlarged or has spots, don't eat that critter. If the kidneys and liver look normal, well, you're probably okay.
Did you want to mention otters in particular?
Oh, otter is one that I definitely don't recommend eating. They are edible. You can find a meat eater episode where they eat an otter. So by all means, go for it if that's your thing. But otter do tend to bioaccumulate heavy metals and PCBs that are in the water because otter are eating basically benthic invertebrates. So they're eating things that live in the bottom of the water. They accumulate all the bad stuff. And otters in particular have a specialized kidney that's lobed and has an incredible amount of surface area just to deal with all these toxins that they encounter in their everyday life. So, given all those things, I do not recommend people eat river otter or probably anything in the mustelid family because they do tend to bioaccumulate pretty bad. But again, that being said, they're made out of meat, so if you really want to, go for it. Me personally, I'll stick with the beaver is the king of the fur bearers. I mean, honestly, I think if most people were to try beaver and deer at the same time, it'd probably be 50-50 on who likes beaver better, who likes deer better. So Really good. Muskrat's really good. Even bobcat is it's a lot like pork. It's hard to describe. It's like a white meat like pork, and hey, it's pretty good.
And with beaver too, you can get a nice chunk of meat at one time.
Yeah, big critter. So, a couple beaver, you're basically got about as much meat as you got with a deer. So pretty cool. But obviously, statewide regs, like I mentioned, have these on your phone, carry the book with you. There's no shame in it. No shame at all. Nobody's going to make fun of you for carrying that. Now, finding a spot when it comes to public land, so a lot of them are open to trapping, but a lot of them you do have to get special permission to trap, or some of them will, depending on how many people request to trap it, they may even have a special drawing just to allocate trapping privileges. Now, some of them you can trap, but most of the ones that are just open trapping, it's going to be water trapping only. So dealing with muskrat, beaver, that sort of thing. But I will say, when it comes to trapping, this is the easiest, probably, of all the types of hunting that you can do to get permission for. So much so that I have even in the past put ads on like Facebook or Craigslist or whatever that says, hey, I'm new to the area. I'm a trapper. If anybody needs nuisance trapping, let me know. And I've got trapping places by that. Like, you want to talk about, you think that would ever happen with deer? You think I could post, hey, I'm looking for a spot to hunt deer, and somebody's just going to message me, hey, I've got 100 acres right by you. Will you please come and try to hunt these deer? Well, I guess it could happen, but it's never happened to me and never happened to anybody that I know of. But when it comes to trapping, it does actually happen. So don't be afraid to ask permission, and don't even be afraid to broadcast. And even talk to your local CPO and let them know that you're interested in trapping, and they'll start throwing you permissions, because they'll talk to somebody that's got an issue and be like, oh, you know what, I know a trapper. And the next thing you know, they'll be hooking you up with a phone number to somebody that's got a pond full of muskrats, or got beaver clogging up some kind of culvert, and you're well on your way to getting permission. And for me personally, I like to use the trapping permission to then get more hunting permission. So maybe it starts off, I'm just trapping a problem beaver, right? And then I trap that problem beaver, and the next year they're happy and they're like, okay, you know what? You can trap the whole farm, wherever you want to trap. And then the next year they're happy with that, and they're like, you know what? You can small game hunt and turkey hunt. And maybe 4 or 5 years in, now I've got the invite to deer hunt and duck hunt, and basically have the run of the property like it's my own. So kind of a long game strategy, but a lot of these landowners are viewing what we do as trappers as a service. They're viewing a lot of these critters as nuisance critters, whether they are or whether they aren't. Some of them they actually are, because maybe they've got livestock, they've got chickens, they've got problems. But whether they are or aren't, they're basically viewing it as a service. And I've even had people that have given me permission to come trap, and I've happily come trapped. And then when I was done, they wouldn't let me leave without also giving me money. And I try to tell them, hey, no, I wanted to do this, but they have been trying to deal with this problem for a long time on their own with no luck. And hey, it happens. So anyway, with trapping, much easier to get private land permission than probably any other type of hunting or trapping we ever talk about.
And
But
even
definitely,
even in the
yeah.
northern part of the state too. Like I'm up in Will County, and I had somebody asking me the other day about if I knew somebody interested in hunting or trapping coyotes and foxes. So it's out there.
Oh yeah. But the huntillinois.org, good place to look for hunting and trapping places in general. Always like to mention that if you are out during any of the firearm seasons, you do have to wear blaze orange or pink, even if you're not specifically hunting. So because we know the trapping season starts on November 10th, so guess what? You can be trapping during some of the firearm seasons. You gotta wear that high vis. Gotta do it. Now, what do you need to be legal? Well, you need your trapping license, which if you're a resident, it's only $10. You need your state habitat stamp, which you need that for everything, so you probably already got it, but that's $5. And that's all you need. That's pretty good. Now, you do need trapper education if you were born after 1998, but it is recommended for everybody. So you can take there's a trapper education you can take right online. You can get it done in just a day or two. It's not too hard, so you can get that done, your required thing, anytime. But I definitely do recommend, and there's not many live classes taught, unfortunately, but if you do see a live class taught, definitely encourage you to take that because you learn way more in a live class than you do in the online version. But you got to do one to be legal if you were born after 1998. But a lot of states now are requiring trapper education like hunter ed. So if it's something you're interested in, definitely take it. And even, you can feel free to look at other states' trapper education too, especially if you're located close to the border. I know I worked in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's trapper ed is accepted by Illinois, and Wisconsin does have quite a few classes there too. Of course, they're going to be Wisconsin specific, so definitely Illinois specific is going to be much better if you can find one. But just knowing you folks up north, if you have to, don't completely ignore Wisconsin because there's a good chance to get a good class in there too.
I
Bobcat.
did, I dropped that link in the chat as well.
Oh, nice.
And Wisconsin, for any ladies, has a women's trap camp. They do once a year, once or twice a year as well. They usually fill up quickly, but I do recommend checking that out if you're interested.
Sure, yeah, you're going to be in the next one, right?
Yep, yep, in March.
Nice. Yeah, this is the first one they're doing in March, I think. The other two have been in the fall, so this should be pretty cool. See how it works in March, but and yeah, so last thing, bobcat and otter, if you do harvest either one of those are both CITES species, so you do have to register it. It's $5 to register it and get that CITES tag. So, CITES tag, what the heck is a CITES tag? CITES stands for the Convention for the International Trade for Endangered Species and Lookalikes. So both bobcats and river otter are on Appendix 2, lookalike species. So neither river otter or bobcats are endangered, of course. We know that because we can take them. But they both look like other endangered species. Every other species of otter in the entire world is endangered. Every one of them. Every one of them. Go ahead, check through the list. They're all endangered except for river otter, which is doing surprisingly well. Bobcats are the only spotted cat in the world that are not endangered. Again, the only one. So, because they both are look-alike species, they're both CITES tags. So what that means is when the IDNR gives you a CITES tag and you snap that on, that CITES tag is to give everybody confidence that that animal, that pelt that you're holding, it's not a sea otter or a small clawed otter, and that cat's not some kind of baby, endangered cat from Malaysia. It's a bobcat that was legally taken in Illinois. Or same with the river otter. That's a river otter that was legally taken in Illinois. That's what those CITES tags mean. So once that tag's on there, then you can sell it, you can get it mounted, you can tan it, you can do whatever you want. And then if you do get it tanned and you want that to hang in your house forever and never leave, you can remove the CITES tag at that point. But they all have to get that. You have to register them after you take them. You got to get the CITES tag and you got to snap it on until it gets to its final destination. That's got to be there. And you've got to draw a bobcat tag before you can pursue one. So that's the one critter you got to get the tag before you can even go after them.
So if you get one, you have to let it go if you don't have the tag.
Yep, and the good thing about bobcats is because we're dealing with a ambush predator as opposed to most of our predators are cursorial predators, right? Foxes, coyotes, mink, otter, all these things are just go, 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 go. Run until their prey is exhausted and they win and they go, 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 and then they go some more, right? Bobcats are completely different to that, where they expend as little energy as is necessary to survive, and this makes them very good in traps. Basically, I don't think I you could probably use, and I wouldn't recommend it, but you could probably use a bear trap and trap bobcats and they would still be releasable. Again, not recommending that, but out of all those over 100 bobcats trapped in Wisconsin, they didn't have a single trapping related mortality event, which is absolutely astounding. Most of the time, you can't even tell which paw of the bobcat was in the trap. All the ones I've ever caught, you could not tell at all. So bobcats hold up very well. You do have to release them if you do catch them, yeah. Catch pole is a good way to do that. If you don't have a catch pole, another good way is just a big tub that is big enough to go over the critter. And then if you can kind of pull their paw with the trap under that and keep some weight on it so they can't get you, take the trap off and then flip it, let them go. So yeah, either the tub method or release pole. Bobcats are not. You got to have your wits about you, but they're not.
Badgers.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like badgers are a little tougher, especially because of their shape. It's hard to even get them in a catch pole and keep them there because the whole badger's shaped like a dang wedge, right? So you get the catch pole on it and it just moves and it's right out of it. Yeah, badgers can be, and badgers hold a grudge
Yeah,
too.
say they'll come at you.
Yeah, so even after you got the badger, he's completely free, he's healthy, like everything's good, and you think, all right, go about your business. No, he's going to chase you to the truck and jump up and try to get you out of the window. So bobcats at least are a lot more friendly than that. So we already talked about the Trapper Ed, and we got the link there as well, online and in person. Now let's get into the basic types of traps. So first off, these all here are all live traps. These are all live restraining traps. So a lot of people will call box traps or cage traps live traps, and that's correct. They are live traps, but all of these are live traps. So footholds are live traps. They're designed to capture an animal and keep it alive until we get there, and then you can either decide to release or to render that animal to your possession. But that's what a live trap is. Footholds, probably the most common, just because boxes or cage traps are bigger, more expensive, harder to store a lot of them. Also, it's not always the most humane option. Now this box trap in the picture, this is a good example. I like this because it's completely square. I don't like the box traps that have a slanted door because it gives a small corner for the animals to try to pry against, and you tend to see a lot of injuries to animals' rostrums or the side of their nose because they try to wedge through those. But this box trap I like because it's got small holes, it's completely square. That does look like a good box trap there. But just to the left of that, we have what a lot of people are going to call dog-proof traps. The real name, a better name for these is enclosed trigger traps. But again, dog-proof, most people are going to know what you're talking about. And then in terms of foothold, we either have long spring or coil spring. And it's just like it sounds like. That one on the left there, that's a number one long spring. It's powered by a spring that's long, whereas the trap to the right of that is a coil spring. It's powered by some little coiled up springs that are underneath those levers that you can barely see, but it's got one on each side that powers the trap. Now, opposed to our live restraining traps, we've got killer type traps. So this is a completely different method. Now the goal is to catch an animal and to kill it as quickly and humanely as possible. So if anybody has ever set a mouse trap is a killer type trap. It's a body grip trap that intends to kill the mouse through thoracic compression, which is basically pressed down with enough pressure on the lungs that the animal can't breathe and it dies of asphyxiation. Now, that is the same way that big cats kill. So it doesn't sound particularly friendly, but in the world of death, You know, it's about as friendly as it goes. And they've actually tested this. We'll talk about the BMPs here in a slide or two, but they test a lot of these in the BMP process, and most of the body grip traps, they do kill quicker than not only archery equipment, but most of them kill faster than firearms. So they actually do dispatch animals quicker than a gunshot, standard gunshot through the lungs or heart most of the time. Um, Now, other than body grip traps, we can also talk about snares, which is just a cable device. And now you can rig up a cable device so it's a live restraining. In Wisconsin, they do that with cable restraints, but here in Illinois, not a legal method. We can only use snares in water. So in water, they definitely are killer type trap snares. Larger body grip traps, I mentioned it before, but anything with over the 7-inch side, if it's a square, those are water only. We cannot set them on dry land. Now, when you buy a brand new trap, you've got quite a bit to do before you're ready to actually set that in the wild. And this is one of the reasons why I encourage people to buy used equipment, because a lot of these steps are already done. But you either need to dye and wax your footholds, which is what a lot of people do, or they do sell a speed dip option, which you can order from any of the major trap dealers, which my favorites, there's only a couple really large trap supply dealers in North America, but they're all really good and they all pretty much carry everything you need. But right in Illinois, we've got Katz Brothers, which is Kaatz, trap dealer. They deal about everything. There's also F&T Trading Post, which is just FNT Trading Post, and a couple others if you search out there. But if you're in any of the trapping association, Illinois Trappers Association, you'll get the Trappers Post magazine that comes out 4 or 5 times a year. Several of the big trap dealers are going to advertise in there, so definitely check those out as well. Or the other group, other than the Illinois Trappers Association, there's also the Fur Takers of America, and through there you get their magazine, which comes out every single month, and they've also got the same trap dealers kind of posting in there. So,
I threw
but
all those links in the chat a little further up for the Trappers Association and National NTF, and then I also threw Katz Brothers, the F&T, and the Minnesota um, Trapline products. So
nice.
if anybody wants to check those out.
Yep. A lot of good stuff there. So, brand new trap, what do you got to do to it? The speed dip that you can buy, you mix that with Coleman lantern fuel, so basically just white gas, and you mix it up, you dip your traps in it, and then you got to set them somewhere to dry. You definitely want to set them somewhere not over not in your garage, because that speed dip, when it falls and hits the ground and dries, it's pretty hard, you know. So it's hard to scrape up. So better to do that over grass if you can. Personally, if I can, I would rather use the logwood dye, and you can even make this yourself. You just put a bunch of water in a pot, build a fire underneath of it, and then throw a whole bunch of walnut hulls, a bunch of sumac berries, just a whole bunch of natural chunks of wood, whatever you can find in there, and you just basically set the traps in there long enough until they take that coloration. And you can buy it like that, the logwood trapwood dye, where you don't have to throw anything in there that's already got pulverized pieces of wood and walnut hulls and sumac and everything in it. And then after you do that process, then you would do the same thing, dipping them in melted wax. And you just dip the trap in, pull it out, and just to give it a little coating of wax over the whole trap, keep it protected, keep it a little scent proof, keep it so it doesn't rust, and make sure that the whole trap keeps functioning properly and quickly too. Other tools. So there was a question about this. Here's kind of a picture of the other tools you'll mainly need, and this is going to be different whether you're dry land trapping or water trapping. And I feel like for somebody just getting started, Water trapping is probably the way to go because it's a little less equipment needed, and it's also you're going to have more success more quickly in water trapping, especially if you've got access to some muskrats, some raccoons. When it comes to, like I mentioned, the coyote, he's probably the most highly persecuted animal in our forest, in our fields. So they are tricky. They're tough. If you set out even the perfect trap, the most perfect trap, it may be a week or two until that actually works to catch the coyote. So imagine you're checking that trap 10, 15, 20 times before you get that catch. When it comes to water trapping, muskrat, beaver, raccoon, your odds, your catch percentage is going to be much higher. You can also deal with less equipment because a lot of times we're using, like, let's say for muskrat, if you've got a good muskrat run and you're using 110 body grip traps, that's a killer type trap. You can have a lot smaller stakes. A lot of people could just stake it with a lat, a hardwood lat, basically shove through the ring of the body grip trap, and that's enough of a stake because that 110, just like a mouse trap, when it fires on a mouse and it kills a mouse pretty quickly, that's going to kill the muskrat in less than 90 seconds, and they're not going to fight that thing much at all. So you see how you need a lot less for that than if we were going up to trap a coyote. Now we've got to have stakes to stake that so it can withhold a coyote. We need a sifter so that we can put dirt over the trap. We need probably some lures and different things that are going to attract the coyote to our location. A lot more stuff goes into it. Not to say that you can't start with the upland trapping, especially if you're interested in those critters, by all means, go for it. But I generally recommend muskrats, raccoons, best place to start. And start with the minimum amount of equipment as you can. You can start with just 3 traps, just a few traps to go out there and get your feet wet and slowly build over time. A handy trowel or I like to call them a 3-in-1 tool. If you see this hammer here, it's a hammer on one end and it's a scraper on the other end, and you'll see a lot of these that then have a shovel or a small trowel on this end. That's called a 3-in-1 tool. I love those because you can do so much with it. I'm always carrying one of those with me when I'm trapping. Kind of looks like this might be one right here, but it's hard to see because it's in front of that other trowel there. Now, I mentioned these before, the best management practices of trapping. Now, I'm not going to get into all this, but basically the main thing that you need to know is this is one of the largest wildlife-related research projects that's ever happened in the history of the world, really, because this has been ongoing since 1997, and they've tested just thousands and thousands of trap types. And basically what this means for you is you can search AFWA, which is the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. If you search AFWA, AFWA, fur bearer, all this stuff's going to come up. All of their BMPs, and you can click on a BMP, a best management practice, which is split up by species. You can click on one for raccoon. You can click on one for muskrat. You can click on one for fox. You can click on one for coyote. They have one for every single fur bearer that we have in Illinois and beyond that. And not only will it talk about what are the best traps that you can use for this critter, but it'll also tell you some of the best set types and just a ton of awesome information. So definitely check that out. It's a good thing to look at when you're buying traps. It's also just a good thing to look at to teach you about what are some of the best, most effective trapping methods. Not just most effective at catching critters, but also the most humane trapping methods. These are the same that wildlife researchers are using. So definitely check that out. A lot of cool research there.
I just threw that link up as well.
Nice. Link Central.
Yep.
Now, methods. I put this picture on here because it's a cool little picture. You look at that and you're like, what's going on there? I've got aluminum foil wrapped around the pan of that number 11 double long spring. And I love this picture because this is a good way for me to showcase how, if you are an informed trapper, you can make your sets basically as selective as you want to make them. So some people that are uninformed would look at that trap, a number 11 foothold, and they would be like, okay, that is a just a completely, anything that steps in that trap is going to get caught, right? It's non-selective. And technically they would be right. But guess what? I was trapping raccoons in a riffle in moving water. And so this is a tactic I was taught by my dad, who's passed it down the line. A lot of trappers know it. All you have to do is wrap aluminum foil around the pan and put your trap in moving water. And raccoons that are used to looking for shiny things, like think about a fish, a clam, in moving water, the moving water actually makes it look like that's moving. That aluminum foil in the moonlight will be dancing around like a little fish. This is a way you can catch raccoons and have almost no appeal to other critters like, say, dogs. Now if I had a smelly fish in a hole, a dog might come up there just like a raccoon to investigate. But guess what? I have never once had a dog investigate one of these with a visual lure on it, which is just aluminum foil on the pan. So this is a good example how a little bit of information can make you, the trapper, turn what is a non-selective trap into something that is almost so selective that when it's used like that, you can almost just call it a raccoon-specific trap. Now, not 100%, because I have heard of people catching otter and pretty much anything on the creek that eats fish you might catch in that set. But hey, that's cool, where you can set a set that catches a critter like a raccoon but has almost no appeal to a dog. Pretty neat. But one little distinction I want to talk about, land set and water set. So this can depend on what traps that you can use, right? Because land sets, you can't have our large body grip traps on the land, but you can have a cage trap on the land. Vice versa, we do not have cage traps in water sets. And now in water sets, we can have the larger body grip traps as long as they're a half underwater. Also snares. As long as the set is touching water, whether that's moving water or impounded, that's a water set. If it's not touching water, that's a land set. But both of them have to be run every day and all animals removed. So now we're down at the end and we're running out of time, but that's good. We're just here on the last few slides. Let's talk about some of the basic beaver sets. And here's one of the most basic. You just find your dam. That's a beaver dam. A beaver dam is always going to have a crossover. It's always going to be near the center. There's going to be a crossover. Every animal that uses that is going to use that crossover. So you can catch beaver there, you can catch muskrat, you can catch mink, you can catch otter. Good set for all of them. So if you're trapping a location and you want to catch all those critters, sure, put you a 330 right there in that trail over the dam and you're probably going to have something the next day. If you want to be more selective for just beaver, there's ways to do that though. If I did not want to catch an otter in a location and I wanted to catch a beaver, I would utilize more of one of these sets. So either a caster mound, which is going to use beaver caster and try to narrow the animal down to a spot on the shore where you can either catch them in a larger foothold or even a body grip trap that's on his approach, but going to beaver caster. That's going to be much more selective to the beaver than just the crossover. Now, is it 100% selective? No, because all animals are interested in that smell, beaver caster. This set over here to the right is even more selective. This has almost no appeal to an animal like an otter or a mink, but it has a lot of appeal to a beaver, especially under the ice when they see that green-white underbark showing on one of their favorite foods, some popples, willows, anything like that. that then becomes the bait. You put those snares on the side, and that's a good baited set for beaver with almost no appeal to any other critter. Pretty cool. Now, under the ice, you can use baited sets with either footholds or body grip traps, and these work for beaver and muskrat. For muskrat, things like apples, carrots, potatoes, these all make good bait. But when it comes to beaver, you do want to use the sticks, little twigs that are going to be like willows and softwoods. You can usually tell what the beaver are eating. A lot of times it's willows. Use that same thing for your bait. Muskrat set you see here on the top right, that's a muskrat float. You can make these things. The one thing that I would caution with that float, I would cover the top, because just like side exposed bait, is good at catching. If you were to use fur or anything, you could catch birds of prey. That side exposed bait could be a good way to catch a duck or a goose. So I do like to cover my muskrat float so that I'm less likely to catch a duck or a goose. And then this trap here, the other one that's attached to that brick, you can see basically right along this rock, you see this really worn trail. Muskrats, just like any critters, they run trails. You can actually see, like, looks like some tracks here, but this trail, putting a 110 in that trail, that is always going to be a good set, because all muskrats that swim through here are going to utilize this good trail. Not just muskrats, but mink as well. So definitely a good set. Now your basic raccoon sets, some people will use body grip traps, elevated. And this is a killer type trap. So when we do use body grip traps, I do like to encourage people to elevate it on a leaning pole like this is. That's going to basically eliminate the most possibility for most dogs and cats to go in there. Raccoons will readily climb. Most of the dogs out there will not. So the elevated set makes that more selective. But this other set here, this is your basic pocket set. And we'll show this a little better in the next slide. But you see this PVC pipe here just pushed in the bank. That's going to be baited with probably some fish or some fish oil. And then this foothold is just stuck down in the mud right in front of that. So you don't have to cover it or anything. You just kind of bed it in the mud right in front of your pocket. And here's what they look like kind of drawn. So you're seeing that the trap is under the water line, so the critter doesn't see it, but it's not covered under the dirt. And then you've got your bait or lure up above the water line, but they have to get in the water to inspect it. Good way to catch mink, muskrat, raccoon, otter. Now here's some of our basic upland sets. So these could be fox, coyote, bobcat, and one of the most common is a dirt hole. And this is designed to basically imitate a fox cache. And that's what you're trying to design. And for these, you actually are sifting dirt over the trap completely so that it looks like you were never there. And here's what they look like, the little diagram. So you see now the trap is completely under the substrate. It is under the dirt, so you don't see that it's there. We're generally utilizing some kind of backing just so that we know which way the critter's probably going to approach the set. And then if you dig a hole, it's called a dirt hole. If you don't have a hole like that, the trap on the left there, they call that a blind set. Or if you were to spray urine on that backing, that could be a scent post set or a pee post set, urine post set, anything like that. And then if you have things on both sides like this one on the right, that's a walkthrough set. So yeah, that one's a little different than a common dirt hole because they have things on both sides, called a walkthrough. Now, once you get the critters, we've got this whole other aspect that we're not doing with most of our other animals, that's fur handling. So again, you can eat most of these critters, so you can go ahead and save the meat, especially for muskrat, beaver, stuff like that. But now you have the hide. Once you skin it off, so most critters, everything except beaver is skinned out, we call it case skinned. So you're basically cutting in the from back leg, from the back foot to back foot, cutting around the vent and then pulling the hide off like a sock, the entire hide. And so all these muskrats that are here, these are all cased out. This is how we skin almost everything. The only thing that's different is beaver. And beaver are split all the way down the center from the tail to the chin, and then the whole hide comes off like a jacket, not a sock. So a little bit different. Beaver split all the way down the middle and comes off in a big circle. All the other critters are going to be basically the cut's going to happen at the back, and then that's going to be the only hole. The rest of the hide's going to be intact. But once you get that off, this wooden thing right here in the center, this is called the fleshing beam. And you can buy these or make them, and it's just kind of a piece of wood that has a curvature that matches your fleshing knife. And this here is a Necker two-handled fleshing knife. There's a bunch of different ones, but the two-handled knives are going to be the best ones. They've got a sharp side and a dull side. And so you can use either side. Most of the time we're using the dull side. And you can grab both handles, put the hide on here, slip it over. So basically this wood takes the place of the carcass. And then you're pushing all of the meat and fat off with the knife. Mostly the dull side, just using the sharp side when you have to. Once you've got all the meat and flesh off, then you can dry it. So you're either going to be putting them over a stretcher like these muskrats and hang up for a few days, or for beaver, because they're done in a circle, most people are going to tack them out to plywood using little nails or staples, tack it out there. They've got fur harvesters, and all the fur buyers basically have different beaver patterns that you can draw right on your piece of plywood, and then just match the beaver to the pattern. Nail it up there in the circle, let it dry. After it dries for a few days, you can take those nails out, and the beaver or whatever the critter is will hold that shape then indefinitely. So at that point, once they're dry, they're pretty much shelf stable. You can either stack them in a freezer or in a cold, dark place and wait until you're ready to either tan them, use them, or sell them. And utilization, this is a great time for personal utilization, because it does not matter what other people want to pay for it. Still, fur is some of the warmest, most luxurious stuff out there that you can wear. So if you want a coat, a hat, a pair of mittens that's going to keep you warmer than anything you can buy, and be more ecologically sustainable, and not to mention have a story, because instead of just saying, oh yeah, I bought this hat online, you can be like, hey, I got this hat. This was a raccoon that I trapped over there on that pond, 15 years ago. It's got a whole story, an adventure that comes with it, which is amazing. But if you were going to do this, once you got the fur put up, stretched, dried, all that stuff, you would then send it to a tannery. And there's a bunch of different tanneries. The one that I like that's kind of nearby is Sleepy Creek Tannery in Iowa. So you can send all your furs to them, and it's somewhere around 35 to 40 bucks per critter. They will tan those up and send them back to you. It takes like 6 to 8 months. It takes a while to get your stuff back, but when they send it back to you, it'll be tanned, it will be soft, pliable, it will basically be in the state that you can do anything you want with it. So if you're the type that knows how to sew, you can cut that up into some kind of pattern and sew it up into a coat, a hat, a mitten, any type of thing you want to wear once you do that. So or some people just tan it, and then you've got a tanned fur that you can hang on your mantle. Or in beaver, they come out as round, so I know a lot of people just get several of those big tan beaver, put them on the top of your couch. Somebody gets cold, they just snuggle up with that. I promise you, it's warmer than any other blanket you have in your entire house. So actually, you mentioned Jenna for the women's trap camp. She made a raccoon bedspread. she made a raccoon bedspread because she lives way up in northern Wisconsin. I think she wanted to go all winter without the heat. And basically, it's so hot. It's so hot that she can't use it. She even said in the winter she turns off her heat. It's still too hot that she can't use it. So I think she's wishing she would have used muskrat instead of raccoon. But anyway, warmer than anything you can buy for sure, and used in a lot of different ways. I put paintbrushes on there because that's one thing people don't think of a lot. But high quality paintbrushes are almost always made out of fur.
Hmm.
Um, it is, and you can't. We had in Wisconsin, we had somebody who was a vegan, and then they wound up actually in our trapping class because of art. And they said they had to leave being a vegan because their art was too important to them, and they could not find any brush that was vegan that could even hold a candle to the fur brushes. And so they decided they were going to become a trapper so they could at least trap their own raw materials to make their own brushes. And I'm like, that's awesome. Good story. But anyway, a lot of different ways to utilize fur. A great time to use it for yourself. And yeah, experiment. Try to sew something up. You make somebody a Christmas present out of fur that you trapped yourself. I mean, you talk about a cool and unique Christmas present that you can't get anywhere else. That's it.
Even at the Becoming an Outdoors Woman, we saw they had a fur sewing class, and there was a lot of happy ladies running around with little raccoon hats. So
For sure. And they sewed those up in just a couple hours.
yeah, yeah, they looked very good. Like they were very cool.
Very nice. And they say a well-made fur garment will last for 3 generations. So just imagine those ladies sewed up that hat in just a couple hours. It was already keeping their head warm. Some of those ladies might be passing those down to their kids and grandkids, and it's going to keep their heads warm, 50, 75 years from now. That's just amazing. But anyway, here's some additional resources. Some of these we've already got in the chat, but here they are here as well. There's a lot of additional resources out there. And in general, trappers they're helpful. It's not like the old days where everybody they didn't want to help anybody because you were the competition. Nowadays it's more like trappers are a lot more helpful because they just like to see other people out in the woods utilizing resources and doing things that aren't playing video games, and being in the metaverse and all that other stuff that people do nowadays. So definitely utilize the resources. Join the Illinois Trappers Association. Join the Fur Takers of America. Both of those groups, you get 2 different magazines. They both do a bunch of stuff in Illinois, and they both have a bunch of people that really will help you out. We've worked with people from both organizations, and we've just been blown away at how helpful they are to not just us, but everybody that wants to go out there and learn how to trap. So some really excellent resources here for anybody that wants to delve into this a bit further. With that, I will turn it over to any questions, and I'll look and see if we got any stacking up here.
We have one that says if you had to rank them balancing time, cost, and effectiveness, what method of trap preparation would you choose as the best? I know you said you preferred.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, yeah, I still prefer the logwood dye and the wax. And with the caveat, it is a little bit quicker to do the speed dip. But it still loses out to me in total effectiveness because it makes the traps sticky, and every time you set them, like I like to set on my knee, and that speed dip will leave like a little almost oily black residue on my knee that I wouldn't get with if I dyed them and waxed them. So for me, even though it was a little bit quicker to do the speed dip, it cost me more time like altogether because I basically had to treat those traps special when I set them because I didn't want to get nasty black gunk all over my pants, right? So
mhm.
personally, I like the logwood dye and the wax, and that's something that for most people that are just trapping a little bit here and there, You probably only have to do that once every 2 or 3 years, and you're good. Especially the dying part. You probably can get by 3, 4, 5 years without dyeing them. You might just have to wax them 2 or 3 times in there, but it's kind of fun to make a big fire outside and boil up stuff. You feel like a witch around a cauldron. At least I do, which I like.
Do you enjoy making, have you made your own as well? I know you've mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always utilized like commercial too, but then I
Mhm.
also add my own because we always had walnut trees. So why not? I'll throw some walnut hulls in there and other little things I can find. So I do, but I add it to commercial stuff, so I probably don't have to. That's more just me playing around.
Yeah, knowing you as I do, I figured that was
Yeah, you
kind of
gotta
the
pretend
approach you
like you're
took.
you're
But
making a big big stew or something. You gotta throw stuff in the boiling water.
exactly.
More fun. Stir it with a big wooden spoon, maybe.
Does anybody else? Do you guys have any questions? Feel free to throw them in the chat.
Yep, yep. If not, we will, like we mentioned, we will have the recording of this available. We'll make sure and send that to you all, and we'll have it up on our YouTube as well for everybody.
And you're also welcome if you have any specific questions, send us an email. We can help you out. We're hoping to have some more trapping content coming, so
Yeah, we're working on actually posting a in-person trapping workshop. So we're trying to get the date and location all figured out. Unfortunately, it's not going to be up in the Chicagoland area, not this one, because we did get a location further south. But at least we've got one in the hopper, and we do have one up further north that we're kind of working on too. So keep your eyes out. We're hoping for at least one, maybe two hands-on trapping workshops later this winter. And then if we have luck there, hopefully we'll have a beaver, and then maybe we'll have a beaver butchering and cooking
which
workshop.
would be very cool.
That
And I
would be
got a bunch of used traps and some new traps, so I'm hoping we can get some content on how to actually step by step go through that because I'll be learning with you guys.
for sure, for sure. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Send us your questions, comments anytime you get them, not just now. If you think of them tomorrow, send them our way. And not just questions, but also if you go out and have any luck, definitely share that with us. We love to hear all your old stories. So have a safe and fun time out in the woods in the marsh and a lot of fun stuff. It's a good time to be in the woods. The deer are going crazy right now, but all the seasons are here. It's a fun time to be out there.
All right, I think we're probably good. I see we're losing a few, so
Yep, yep. Thanks, everybody.